Now that we've taken a look at the sacred precinct of the Aztecs, and in particular the twin pyramid temples that we have, and we've taken a look at the skull rack, I think I need to say something about sacrifice. And what I'd like to use to go there is this particular example. It is located in our textbook. Miller has it as figure 253, and it is Xipe Totec. Xipe Totec is the god of spring and of renewal and of agricultural fertility. So this is a really important god, and it is a god who brings you things, who essentially takes care of you. The significance of this god also underscores the continued link between human beings and nature within the context of the New World. What are we looking at? Well, we're looking at an impersonator of Xipe Totec, a human being who's actually playing a role of being the god. And it is played out as this actor wears a full body suit of a human skin that has been flayed from a victim, a sacrificial victim. Okay, a sacrificial victim was killed. The skin of that victim was taken, and then the skin was sectioned, created into sections, and it was sewn together into essentially a costume that an individual would wear. I understand the individual usually is described as a priest, a shaman. Sometimes I've also heard the individual described as a warrior. Whoever it is, they're going to be wearing this skin outfit for around 20 days, a pretty long time. Within that period, the skin will fall apart and decay, and from underneath it, new life will emerge. And what this plays out as is the rebirth of agriculture, just as if we had a seed, think kernel of corn, coming out of a dead casing, out of a husk, out of something dried and dead. The figure itself, if you take a look at the slide on the left, is in a really kind of interesting pose, a taunt pose. And this has been described as being kind of charged with drama because it's the part of the story before rebirth occurs. And you can see that this is a pose that would not be one you could hold for very long, because there's a kind of energy to it. There's also a sense of contrast. The skin is one color, the impersonator is shown with a warmer, more alive color underneath it. And also, if you take a look at the hands of the live human being, they're raised upward in this kind of energized pose. And in contrast, if you go right here, you're going to see the hands which belong to the flayed skin. I'm referring to those as flesh mittens because that's a little bit what they look like. It's important to make the differentiation between those. One is dead, one is very much alive. If you take a look at the face also, you can see the live being underneath the skin mask that is being worn on top. I guess I'd like to return us to the mantra that I'm fond of saying that applies to pretty much all of Mesoamerica in its history, and that is, out of death comes new life. We need to make an offering, and out of that offering, out of that sacrifice, new life will appear. This is the figure seen from a different view, but particularly I'd like you to see it from behind. And if you look carefully, you are going to see some of the details. If you go over here, you're going to see the way in which the skin is actually tied in two places around the body of the wearer. And the same is true. There's a cord extending the sections and knotting behind the head of the person who is acting as impersonator. This is very three-dimensional in form. It's also gently rounded and swelling. Those are words I've used before, particularly beginning with the Olmec creations, people creating objects in the Gulf Coast area. In addition to that, there's a loving, I'm going to say loving, attention to detail. I'd also like to suggest that there's a kind of narrative action. This is not a portrait. This is not a stationary figure. You look at this and immediately you think that there is a storyline, and of course there is. The lips are rounded around the shape of the mouth on the mask that is being worn, and the eyes are, ooh, sorry, that should read semi-closed. They are the eyes essentially of a dead person. Again, you can see the face of the live person underneath. What we think happened here is that the Aztecs assimilate this divine being from the Gulf Coast. Xipe Totec was a god of Veracruz in the classic period. That's the first time we have evidence, definite evidence of the appearance of this divine being. And we think as part of conquest, the Aztecs will assimilate ideas and beliefs and images from a variety of the people that they conquer and a variety of the people that they trade with. I would like to, in particular, point out that this is powerful. I think everybody can agree with that. It is a human being wearing the skin of a dead human being. But typical of the Aztecs, it has been portrayed in an objective way, almost as if you are a reporter telling people what is happening. And the reason for that is the Aztecs would have believed that this was necessary, that this type of sacrifice was necessary for survival, and that it would allow for the recreation, the rebirth, the regrowth, in this case specifically, of the maize crop, probably agriculture in general, but also specifically maize. And this was often likened to a dried up old maize kernel, a kernel from an old cob of corn, planted, being given water and coming back to life. In the process, reenacting the sequences in the natural world, and again reminding us that we need to provide sacrifice to ensure continuation. For the Aztecs, the point I want to make is that this was something that was accepted as a reality. For us, it's very difficult to look at and appreciate, but if you believed that it was necessary to offer blood sacrifice in order to have your crops grow, and therefore in order to survive, I think that this would become something that was acceptable and something that you would be able to, quote unquote, objectively recognize and report on. Xipe Totec images exist in large quantities. We have a lot of them. They come in different forms, and I just included a couple more so you can get an idea of this. The standing form is another version. This is and I borrowed this slide from the web, by the way, so it's not mine. The reason I, in particular, wanted you to see this one is because the skin suit that is being worn by the impersonator is kind of puckered, and that is a reference to the decaying nature of the skin itself as it ages, and in time will flake away and literally die as the new growth underneath emerges. The figure of Xipe Totec also can be conveyed in a mask, and you can see a mask in the upper left. And in that case, you can pick up again the rounded, smooth surfaces, simplified geometric shapes and forms. This is an Aztec piece. And the kind of oval shape of the mouth of the mask of skin, and then underneath it, the living mouth of the person who's the impersonator. The eyes themselves are small and relate to the world of death, awaiting rebirth and awaiting renewal. The image of Xipe Totec, I do believe, had a quality of beauty that was part of it, at the same time that it conveyed a kind of harsh reality, something that the Aztecs accepted as required, necessary for survival. And I'd like to show you another example that I think qualifies as an image of beauty with the acceptance of harsh reality of the world of the Aztecs. And it is a feather shield. This one is not in our book, it's a supplement. Just a reminder that the Aztecs did value feathers and jade much more than they valued gold, and this would be a sample of that. Aztec warriors often had elaborate shields. I've got a little picture in one of the colonial manuscripts lower left of an Aztec warrior with a shield. The Aztec warrior would gain status on the battlefield through his successes, and those successes generally would include the taking of live captives for purposes of sacrifice. As that happened and the status of the warrior increased, his costume got fancier and fancier, and that also would include the shield that he was allowed to wear with it. So his appearance reflected his success, and his costume was basically determined upon the rights that he had earned as a warrior. In this particular shield, which is made of feathers and also of gold, it's been argued, the subject matter has been argued, I'm going to go for Coyote because that works best for me. Coyote was a deity, an Aztec deity, but he's also a trickster. One of the things he liked to do, if he got bored, hey, he's a god, and occasionally gods get bored, he started wars among human beings so that he could just participate or watch from the sidelines. The thing that's really interesting about him is that he's similar to the North American trickster figure of Coyote, and we will return to that when we get to North America. He therefore can easily be associated with warfare and also with a shield that would be used by a warrior. If in fact you take a look next to Coyote, who has his claws extended, you can see his mouth open with his teeth. So I'm going to say he's looking rather aggressive. But next to him, there is a stream right here that represents water, and then flames that come out. This is an image, fire and water, which is a symbol of war. So I'm leaning toward the depiction of Coyote, appropriately suited to a shield used by a warrior. This is a beautiful thing, and it's delicately crafted. It was made out of 4 different types of bird feathers, and that does include the feathers of scarlet macaws, and I think that accounts for the red background, along with very delicate and fragile gold strips that are laid on the surface, all of this being attached to a braided background made out of the bark of the agave tree. This is just a closer look. I think you can see the beauty of this, the iridescent quality that still exists today after 450 years of the feathers, and the glistening quality of the gold. This is located today in Vienna. And I've got to tell you, it's an absolute nightmare for the curators there. It is a very, very delicate object. It's created with rows of feathers from a variety of different birds, orioles, macaws, spoonbills, cotingas, and very, very fragile strips of gold. This kind of object requires extraordinary care in order to preserve it. So think twice before you go into the profession of being a museum curator, because this would be only one of the enormous tasks that you might encounter when you take on that kind of assignment. This is a view from the back. It is not decorated on the back, but you can see strips of material which would allow you to insert your arm and hold this upward. This is believed to be ceremonial. It doesn't look like it's going to defend you significantly on the battlefield, but it is something that a high-ranking and elite warrior would have been able to use in a ceremony or in a public display. And just a reminder, of the importance of feathers in Mesoamerica. They were an important element of tribute that is recorded in the codices, the books that we have from the colonial period. This is a detail from one of those books, the Codex Mendoza. The feathers at the top, those green feathers, are probably quetzal. The one in the middle, the red one, I would guess might be scarlet macaw. The others I'm not certain of, but you can see the enormous desire of the Aztec conquerors to achieve the situation of getting tribute in the form of luxury goods. And there's almost nothing more luxurious than feathers.